Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Gersnet Podcast. As usual, we're coming to you live to bring you the very latest Rangers news, views, and opinions. So thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Now, if it's your first time listening to the Gersnet Podcast, then a very special welcome to you. As well as going live on YouTube, we're also going to be available for download later on iTunes, on Acast, Stitcher, Google Music, wherever you get your podcasts from. So a wee subscribe is always greatly appreciated. Now, listen, we've got a jam-packed show for you this evening. We're going to be looking back at the Hibs game this afternoon. We're also going to be addressing the shape of the squad, the latest transfer gossip. So settle in, let's get down to business. My name's Ross Bennett. I'm going to be your Gersnet host this evening, and I am delighted to be joined by two regular Gersnet Pod contributors. First up, it's a very warm welcome back to Pete. Pete, welcome back from Australia. How are you?
Yeah, great. Just getting used to the German weather of 12 degrees here just now. So I believe it's in Scotland the same. So we went to sort of a 26, 27 degrees way down to 12 within a few weeks. So, but really a lot of rain in Australia. So it was a wee bit like Scotland, except warm.
A wee bit like Scotland, but warm. Did you manage to keep up with the football while you were there?
Yeah, well, kept up with Rangers TV. Unfortunately, when I was there, I couldn't get it onto the cast, but I was watching it on my telephone. But yeah, kept up with it.
Well, listen, it's fantastic to have you back. Looking forward to the show this evening. Also with us tonight, we have from on loan from the ever popular Four Lads Had a Dream blog. Very warm welcome back to Stevie Clifford. Stevie, now I hear you had quite the memorable day at Ibrox today. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a great day today. Fortunate enough to be invited along to do a Czech presentation around 1:30 prior, obviously, to the teams, etc. being there. So that was obviously for the recent Rangers Youth Development raffle that we did and raised nearly £6,000 for the youth. So it was really brilliant to be pitch side. Managed to get some pictures with Mark Haitley and doing the presentation with Colin Stewart and stuff like that. And then I thought that was going to be the end of it, but I was fortunate enough to be, we got to see both teams come in and managed to get a picture with the manager, which was a dream come true, and a couple of the players and things like that. So it was great to see them up and close and things like that. It was a dream for a wee geek like myself, Ross.
For a wee geek. No, it sounds fantastic. And obviously the work that you yourself and everyone else at Four Lads have done for the, like you say, with the raffle and raising money for the youths, it must be pretty sweet seeing the success that the youth have had over the last week or 10 days, obviously winning the youth that won the league again, was it Friday or Saturday night this week that won their league, and winning the cups, and obviously the reserves could win the league for themselves to tomorrow evening. I think it must be pretty special for you knowing that you've contributed to that, given some money for that, and the fan base getting involved with the Four Lads blog have helped with the youngsters coming through.
I couldn't really have done it without the support of everybody else, to be honest. They're the reason we've managed to raise the money and things. I just kind of set the ball rolling with it. But I've always been passionate about the youths. Obviously, my own wee cousin was with Rangers for a long time. He's now with Chelsea. So we've seen a lot of youths in recent years. And back when I was a young single man with no family, I used to go and see the under-18s, under-21s all the time when we had the likes of Fleck and Jordan McMillan and these kind of guys coming through. So it's always been a passion of mine. I always think there should be good young Scottish Rangers boys coming through, and if £6,000 probably isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, but if we can keep making regular contributions, then hopefully it'll maybe help somewhere along the lines. But youth development is certainly something we should be passionate about, and it's great to see the under-16s won their cup final again today, beating Aberdeen 2-1 at the Hummel Training Centre. So, there's success throughout all these levels, 16s, 17s, 18s, and that really is where I consider, and I think the club consider the cream of the crop to be coming through as well. So it's a bright future ahead for these guys.
Absolutely, and it's so important, and it's so great that the fan base now has a vehicle and a mechanism by which to support that and get involved with the youth development. And I'd really recommend anyone that never caught our show last week from last Sunday, when we had Peter from the Rangers youth blog. Came on the show and talked to us about the youth setup at Rangers was absolutely fascinating, genuinely fascinating. So if you no managed to catch that, then certainly take a wee look back on whatever platform you get your podcast from and hear what he had to say, because it was absolutely wonderful. Listen, if it is your first time with us tonight on the Gersnet podcast, then like I say, we are coming to you live. We've managed to activate the comments here on the YouTube. I'll be keeping my eye on that all night. So if you've got any questions, any comments, please do get in touch. Let us know. We'll be keeping our eye on that and trying our best to get as many of you involved in the show as possible. Let's make it interactive. Right, without any further ado, we've got plenty to crack on with this evening, so we might as well get on with the show. Obviously, the first place to start this evening is the Hibs game this afternoon. Pete, it was your first game back after your trip to Australia. Tell us, how did you view this game this afternoon? Was there anyone that particularly stood out for you?
Well, after the last few games, we were really full of hope that the style of play was really, really good. And we started off with a bang, didn't we? I mean, within the first 3 minutes, I think it was, we should have been 2 up, really. And I remember that there was one move that I was clapping at it, was Jack started it. He actually made a mistake in their own box. And then it just went ticky-tacky with Jack all the way through. And then we got a chance at the goal at the end of it. Obviously, I think it was Defoe was caught offside at that point. But in the first 4 or 5 minutes, we had really some brilliant play. And first 20 minutes, still played good. And then we just sort of went into the old style of slogging and just not really getting there. And then turned to the second half, it just died a death, really. I think Hibs, they set up as a diamond to match our diamond, and it seemed to take away all the wind out our sails. So the second half wasn't that great.
No, I completely agree. Stevie, Pete suggested there's a wee tactical tweak from Hibs in the second half. We'll come back to the goal and everything else later on, but the second half we certainly seemed to lose a wee bit of momentum, and in a way it became a bit of a stalemate and certainly became quite a forgettable 45 minutes of football. What happened in the second half that made us lose that momentum? Why did that happen, in your opinion?
Well, we didn't press the ball, and we became deeper than we really need to. I mean, it's all good and well being compact and being hard to beat. And I think the issue was that every time Hibs got it, and they had most of the ball, at least for the first 20 minutes of the second half, but every time they knocked it about, we were really well organised. And this is where I kind of like watching, because it becomes like a game of chess. And although it is boring attacking wise, tactically you get to see how well organised Rangers are, and how the changes that we've recently made kind of work. Because what happens is when we go in that kind of mode, Arfield sits in, and we become like a really tight four. So it's almost, you've got two banks to try and get through. And Hibs, I don't think they, up until Canberra got his chance, I don't think they had anything on target. They had a wee kind of sclaff effort by the substitute that came on, number 17 for Hibs. But apart from that, there really wasn't anything. And that's where there's credit, to come in. Rangers have, I think, 4 clean sheets in 5 now. Katic has been immense during that for me. Everything coming at him in the air, he sweeps up. But there's a proper blend now, where you can see there's football and brain in there with Davis and Arfield and things. So as much as attacking wise we didn't do that well, because we weren't pressing and pushing high up as we should have been. Hibs were I think a man in midfield as well, but they still couldn't create anything. So the point being that, yeah, it wasn't enthralling to watch attacking wise in that, but there is a lot of positives to take out of how we kept our shape, limited them, and basically forced them every time they came with it in midfield. They were forced to go back the way and recycle it, and that's why it was kind of poor in the eye. But for us, shape-wise and things. If we manage to keep that compact and stop teams from getting chances like we have done recently, then it's a good sign going forward.
It's an interesting one, Stevie, because actually, if you look over the course of the season, Hibs have been a difficult opponent for us and certainly very stubborn, and they've nicked results against us, arguably where they shouldn't have done, and where we've let ourselves down. We've let ourselves down against Aberdeen and Kilmarnock, but we've also let ourselves down against Hibs over the course of the season. But it sounds to me like you are fairly impressed with the way that we not only controlled the game for a lot of the first half, but then in the second 45, when there were perhaps changes from Hibs, how we reacted to that, how we responded, how we kept our shape, kept a solid structure, and managed to absorb any pressure that came our way. There's a comment here on the YouTube from T84 who says that there were too many passes backwards in the second half. Perhaps we weren't clinical enough, perhaps we weren't pushing forward enough. He highlights Kamara had a fantastic chance to shoot in the second half. I know exactly what he's referring to. Fantastic chance to shoot where someone perhaps who was more attacking minded might have taken an effort on goal. Would you agree with that we were passing, perhaps retaining the ball too much without looking for a cutting edge, or are you pleased to see that in games against oppositions where we have struggled so far this season?
No, I think it's a fair comment the boy makes. I know the one that talking about Kamara, he was on the right side of the box, nearest the main stand, the second half. I think Kamara, I don't think he's that type of player, to be honest. I didn't think Kamara was that great today. I've seen him being a lot better, but the word passive is probably the best word to use here. I mean, we've seen it in performances before this season when it's been like that. And it's cost us. We're fortunate today that it didn't. And it's a fine line, because had Canberra's stuck away that chance and it had been 1-1, we would have been sitting here saying we've seen this story before, we've seen this game before, etc. So there really is, there's a fine line. But the point I made before, I'm not happy that we didn't press the ball, we didn't exert ourselves on the game, but I'm happy that we limited them and kept our shape and done well defensively. That's important. I mean, we're approaching a summer where we're probably going to be looking at making defensive changes in terms of left back. There's still a massive question mark over whether or not Tav will be here next year, which we'll probably come to later. But if we're making changes to our fullbacks, it would be nice that we could, look at it and say, well, Katic and Goldson together, how much are we going to have to spend to get somebody better than Katic? In terms of our future and things like that. I mean, Katic, remember, 1.5 million. The way he's played the last 3 or 4 games, he came out of the team at the right time. I thought maybe he was kept out of it longer than necessary, but Katic going forward, do we really need to replace him? Or is it a case of, right, let's see who we can pick up on Bosman's, Mexer's in the pipeline, things like that now. We'll obviously touch on that later, but there's positives. For me, I always try and see the bright side out of everything. The boy makes a good point in terms of passive. That's probably how we were today. But I think Ryan Jack says as well that the team were very tired, except for hot weather. It was quite warm today at times. So yeah, it's very much an end of the season game as well. Ross, Hibs went. I don't think they were that interested either, mate. To be that honest.
Tell you what, Steve, you're making my job very easy, because the next thing I was going to come on to there was Niko Katic, who I think has been more than solid and more than dependable in the last 2 or 3 games, and then today I thought strolled it. To be honest, I thought he cleaned up everything that he was asked to clean up. He moved about the park superbly. I never once felt the slight apprehension, the slight unease that we felt with Niko Katic before, and I was absolutely impressed with what the lad was doing. And we have to remember that he's a young lad who's obviously in a new, novel environment for him, a new team with more expectation and more pressure than he's ever been exposed to before. And I think he's, we've all sat on this podcast before being somewhat critical, perhaps, of the way that Katic was treated in the middle portion of the season. Obviously, he played a huge number of games at the start of the season, particularly in the Euro qualifiers, and then was taken out of the team for an extended period. And, there was all this chat of free the Katic one, and would want to see him back in the team, but perhaps the management of Niko Katic as a player and as a human, as an individual, has been perhaps Gerrard and the management team have got that spot on, and I was delighted with the way he played today. I thought he was exemplary, and I thought he was really showing the promise that we hoped for when we were first linked with this young raw centre back for Croatia. Pete, one of the main talking points before this game was when the team came out 90 minutes before kick-off. A huge question was always going to be who leads the line. Morelos back for his suspension, Defoe in decent goal-scoring form, the team putting away goals left, right and centre without Morelos. Who leads the line? And Morelos obviously was left on the bench today. Defoe, given that starting striker's berth. Pete, in your opinion, is that the right decision to leave Morelos on the subs bench?
Well, I really think it was the only decision that Gerrard could have made, because I think if he had have brought in Morelos today from the beginning, I think he would have been leaving himself open for a lot of criticism. It's a tough decision to make, to leave your top goal scorer on the bench, but I think hopefully it'll make Morelos think a bit about it as well, why he's been on the bench. And I think against Celtic we'll probably start without him as well, so especially with his record against Celtic. One thing I was wanting, we were talking about defence here, one thing I want to say as well, James Tavernier, I think the difference in his defending this year under the Gerrard and his staff's training, I think he's absolutely come a million miles from where he was. I know we're going to talk about Players of the Year awards in some time, and I just think it's absolutely terrible that he was not named in it.
So why do you think that might be, Pete? Why do you think that his defensive side has come on so much over the past 6 to 9 months?
Well, I would take it's a lot to do with the training staff and the training that he's getting. He's still had as many assists, but I don't think he's as gung-ho as he used to be. He's sort of now thinks about it. And I think, we've seen quite a lot that nobody covered for him when he was when he went forward. And Candeias, we've seen with a couple of goals that Candeias, I can't remember, was it against Celtic that he just stood and watched, put his hands in his knees. And I think, well, Candeias, he looks like he's working really hard. A lot of times he just lets his player go. And I think that put a lot of pressure on Tavernier as well. But I seem to think with Ryan Jack in there, he covers a lot. And I think that's just people covering for him, plus the fact he's not so gung-ho. And it's the coaching, I think, has really brought him along really far.
It's a really interesting one. It's impossible to predict the future for James Tavernier. He's I think, we're obviously, Pete, we were chatting before we come on air just now that, he's what he brings to the side is perhaps irreplaceable. Obviously, the number of goals and assists that he contributes, not just in one season, but year after year after year, is remarkable for a right back. And obviously, a modern day right back wants to push forward, wants to create, wants to assist. But it's a really difficult one because perhaps his defensive side has been shown up in the past as being somewhat lacking, and that's not without justification. There's a number of goals where you can quite specifically point to Tavernier for losing his man at a cross ball or whatever it might be. So it's a really difficult one, and like I say, we're going to push on and talk about the state of the squad and transfer talk in a wee while this evening. So we'll definitely come to that. One of the biggest talking points this evening, Stevie, is always going to be the red card for Allan McGregor, a man who has been Mr. Dependable, Mr. Reliable, someone who quite conceivably could be Rangers Player of the Season this year, particularly if you look at the European performances earlier on in the season. He finds himself on the receiving end of a red card this evening. In my opinion, it was wholly deserved, and there is very, very little you can say in his defence. Stevie, talk to me about Shagger's red card today. What is he thinking? What's going through his mind there?
I'm not sure. But we shouldn't be shocked because it's not the first time he's done it this year. And that's difficult because Allan McGregor has been exceptional for us. But we're not talking about a young guy. We're not talking about a guy that doesn't know about Rangers. We're not talking about a guy that hasn't been there and done that with regards to our club. For some reason, Allan McGregor at times this year has just had angry man syndrome, and a drawback even to he's had incidents before, but even if you look back at the Kilmarnock game, the one each game at Ibrox recently, where he charged out to a halfway line after the referee, and then that promptly cost him because he got cautioned and then couldn't make a challenge when the boy came through on goal and skipped past him and scored. There's a fine line between being a good leader at the back and being over aggressive and passive aggressive and stuff like that. And Allan McGregor recently has overstepped the mark. What he was thinking about today, I just don't know. McNulty's stood in front of him and been a bit of a pest, and he'll get the free kick for it. But the replay was just hideous. I mean, we were in the ground and I couldn't understand it at the time. And I don't think anyone really understood it at the time, because if you watch it, I don't know if watching it on telly people would have seen this, but people at the ground would have surely noticed it. See, when he showed McGregor the red card and then he showed McNulty the yellow card, there was no reaction from anyone on the pitch. The players took a good 5, 6, 7 seconds to realise he's just sent him off. What is going on? And in one, the Rangers players then ran to the ref and decided, and asked him what was going on. It looks even worse on the replay. And do you know what? I can't offer an explanation. I just don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what went through his head. And it only kind of points back to me that I hope the club deal with him. And I don't say that as if I'm rubbishing him or we should bin him. That's not my point. But the club need to sit down with Allan McGregor and find out what's going through his head, why he's so angry, why these things are happening on the pitch. Be a leader. You don't need to be a leader by doing what you did today. People have a go at Tav for being captain and wanting him to be more like Allan McGregor and stuff like that. But there was an excellent blog put out on Four Lads last week by John McIntosh, who guested for us and wrote it on some of Tav's stats and things like that as captain. That's how you be a captain. That's how you be a leader. You don't need to do what you've done today. You don't need to be the guy that's constantly on at the referee. You can be on at a referee and do it properly, but we don't want guys chasing referees to halfway line when you're supposed to be in goals and things like that. And let's be honest, Allan McGregor's 38. He's in the twilight of his career. He's back playing for Rangers. He's had more nights out with women than I've had in my lifetime in one night, I'm sure. He should be happy. He should be relaxed. He's playing for his boyhood team. Somebody needs to sit down with him and sort it out, because it does us no good. What happened today, it could have cost us, and it'll do his pocket no good when the manager finds him for it, and that's exactly what should happen.
That might be part of his problem, though, Stevie, that he knows he's getting older and his career's not going to be an awful lot longer. That might be part of his problem that's making him angry.
I wouldn't. Well, as a goalkeeper at 38, you've still got 2 or 3 years. It's not like it's ending next week, Pete. He should be in a position where he's the number one at the club. He doesn't have anything to prove. Yeah, there should be a burning desire, and you want all your players to be aggressive in the right way, to go and win things and do things, but you don't want your players to be aggressive like that today. And let's be honest here. See, if he had connected with that boy properly in his back, what damage is he doing to that boy? It's absurd. Watching it again, there's no rational explanation, or there's no defence. The intent is ridiculous. It's lunacy. There's absolutely no other word to describe his behaviour today.
You're right, Stevie. It's absolute madness. And there's almost, you can't justify a thought process that goes on behind that, because there is no thought process behind that. It's incredibly difficult to try and rationalise or justify what he's done there. Stevie, what role does McGregor have for us going forward? Presumably he's number one going into next season, but like you say, he's what, 37, 38 years old. What's the long-term future here, and at what point do we need to start having contingency planning or I don't know, future-proof planning for the goalkeeper position for that number one jersey?
Well, it's already there. Ross, I was going to say Ross McCrory after today maybe, but Robbie McCrory is the future for the club. I think he's the one that the club are looking at. He's the one with the potential. He spent time on loan. I think he went down to Ayr last year, and he was at Morton obviously this year, and he's played every game at Morton. As far as I'm aware, he's the one. He's the future. But Allan McGregor comfortably is our number one for the next 2 and 3 years, and he shouldn't. Nobody's pointing out that he should be, ostracised and put out the team after today. But the point is, the matter is that Alfredo Morelos has let Rangers down at times this year. Allan McGregor's done it as well, and Allan McGregor could have cost us big time. And it goes back to kind of a point I made before about our shape and our defence and stopping Hibs for the last 5-6 minutes when we had a midfielder, a young midfielder in goals. They never got near us. So that's also, that's pleasing the way we saw the game out, and perhaps we're learning on that, which is good. But let's be honest, any shot, header, proper cross at the young fella today, he most likely wouldn't have had a chance. And Allan McGregor's got off extremely lightly in terms of not letting the team down. Contingencies going forward, I don't think we need one. I mean, we probably think West will leave this year and we'll maybe get somebody in. We'll be linked with like Xander Clark and stuff like that. It would be a good deputy in my opinion. But I don't think we need to be overly concerned. I think he just needs to be sat down and for want of a better expression, have his arse kicked and told, look, there's been a good leader and there's been, there's been an idiot in letting your teammates down by being overly aggressive, and you need to step back, sort it out and do it. I mean, he's acting like he's a young boy with a point to prove, and I'm Billy Big Balls, and he doesn't need to do it. It's Allan McGregor, you're the number one, you're the best keeper in the country. Just concentrate on what you're doing and don't get involved in the absolute nonsense. I mean, that every time I see that today, it just gets worse. It's actually cringeworthy. I can't explain it.
Aye, it does. It gets worse and worse every time you see it, and the intent is somewhat baffling, if we're honest. Pete, how do you feel about Wes Foderingham coming into goals against Celtic next season in what could be described as a dead rubber, but there's no such thing as an old firm dead rubber. This is a huge game for Rangers not just in the course of this season, but as a springboard to next season. How do you feel about having Fod as the man between the sticks there?
Well, Wes Foderingham, he's never really let us down, has he? He got dropped for McGregor. McGregor is a better keeper, but I mean, Foderingham was a good number one, and he's certainly a more than good reserve keeper. So that I have absolutely no problem about coming in against Celtic. There was a lot of talk that we should put in a challenge against McGregor's red card, put in an appeal, but I think Rangers would be totally on the wrong foot to do that, because it wasn't a deserved red card, it was stupidity. And no, I think I've totally no problem with Foderingham coming in. The last time he came in, he done really well. I think he was in for 2 or 3 games, wasn't he, when McGregor was suspended? And he done well then. And in one way, Fodderingham's been a wee bit unlucky that he lost his place in the first place. But McGregor is a better keeper, makes better saves. But I've every confidence that Rangers are going to do to Celtic what we've done with them on the 29th of December, and they won't be near our goal that often. So I'm not really worried about the keeper. Might play Ross McCrory again, because hopefully he'll be enough.
Aye, fair enough. I mean, it's an interesting one. And listen, we're going to have a normally regular listeners to the show will know that we do a live show every Sunday evening this time. We're also, as it's the Old Firm this week, we're going to have a midweek Old Firm preview show going out, I think, on Thursday evening, but make sure you keep across all the Gersnet social channels. We'll keep you up to date with that. We'll be previewing the Old Firm clash, looking at who comes in to replace McGregor, looking at who leads the line, all these big questions we're going to tackle this coming week. Colin will be hosting for that, so we're not going to go into that at the moment too much. Definitely check that out throughout the week as it comes. Pete, I'd like to talk a wee bit more in a broader context now, if we move on specifically for the Hibs game, to look at the wider league, how it's gone for us and how we look to progress going into 2019-2020 season. Obviously, Celtic wrapped up the title yesterday with 3 points away at Aberdeen. What a shock that was, by the way, that Aberdeen couldn't beat Celtic. It's never nice to see the Scottish Premiership going to Celtic. It's never nice for a Rangers side to not win any trophy that we go in for. However, considering the rebuilding exercise that's been going on, and considering the false starts that Rangers have had over the past, certainly the past 3 years, but if the rebuilding and the false starts that have gone on for the past 6 or 7 years, the challenge this season, considering the rookie management team, the new players brought in, the rebuild that went in over the summer, the challenge was for us to get closer to Celtic. In your opinion, Pete, is that somewhat, despite the fact that we've won the league this season, is it to a degree mission accomplished?
Well, I don't think for a Rangers team it's ever mission accomplished to become second. But obviously from where we came, then we've travelled a long distance. But I really believe that Rangers should have won the league this year. We threw it away ourselves. Celtic didn't beat us in the league this year. We threw it away. Games like Hibs, where we lost goals, stupid goals to make it one each, or a game against Aberdeen at the beginning of the season when we lost in the last minute. We played nearly 90 minutes with Morelos sitting in the stand. Games like that cost us the league, and inconsistency cost us the league. Morelos' behaviour cost us the league. I certainly don't think because Celtic were there for the taking this year, and just unfortunately we weren't big enough to stand up. The players weren't. They didn't. The likes of Morelos getting sent off and things like that. McGregor, the way he's been acting, we've just been not good enough, too inconsistent, and hopefully that we'll get things like that sorted out and we'll come out, because we have really played the best football this year, I think, in spasms. The likes of that move in the second minute, I think it was, of the game today. I was just absolutely up my feet, standing clapping at it. And I really think if with a few players added to the squad, I really think we should be right up there for the title next year.
I totally agree with you, Pete. I think that we said this last week as well when Stevie and John were on the show. We said that the difficult thing for us to kind of swallow is that it's been fine margins. It's been the Aberdeen game, the Motherwell game, where we've dropped points in the last minute. The converse of that is that the Celtic, they had, was it back in February or March, they had Dundee and Kilmarnock, where they turned draws into wins in the last minute. If those results had gone the other way, they lose 6 points there, we pick up 4 points there. This league looks completely different. It's fine margins, and that's what's simultaneously encouraging and disheartening, is the fact that we've not been able to capitalise where we should have been able to capitalise, but we're not a million miles away. It is fine margins. Stevie, how confident are you of stopping Celtic getting 10 in a row? And perhaps on a bigger point, how important is it that we do stop 10 in a row? Is it meaningless, or is it quite significant that we do win the title within the next 2 years?
Difficult question. 10 in a row is meaningless to me in terms of it's my opinion, it's a fallacy. We weren't there for, half of them. They done their best to bury us so that they would have this chance. Different discussion possibly, but in terms of them winning, I'm not interested. It's more about Rangers returning to where we belong and completing our recovery, and that'll not happen until we win the league title. I'm confident in where we're going. I'm confident in the summer. I've said that vocally. I've said that before. I believe that we'll do big things this summer. And I believe it will be ready. If you look at just anyone that that wonders, just listen to Steven Gerrard post-match 2.5 minute interview today. Beating Hibs 1-0, 5 games in a row, and he's not happy. He's not content. And he knows that was a similar game to where we've dropped today, etc. And he knows where we have to address. Steven Gerrard isn't here in a jolly. He's got a huge reputation, which he's very much put on the line, and he's desperate for us to be winners. I just, Pete, you talked about this season being a missed opportunity and things like that. And yeah, in some ways, maybe in other ways, it's like you say, it's fine margins. But I'm confident in where we're going. I'm confident in what we're going to do to be there. And it's a huge summer ahead, and I'm confident we'll get it right. I'm confident we'll be ready for next year.
Can I just say is one thing that I've watched and saw all year is that see when Celtic are winning one or drawing one each with 5 minutes to go, you're sitting praying that they're not going to score. See when Rangers are drawing one each, you're thinking to yourself, we could play here another 5 hours and still no score. That seems to be the difference between the two teams as well. Celtic seem to have that drive to get a result to the last second, and we in the games that we draw one each, we just seem that we're never going to score.
Now, Pete, is that a physical thing? Considering we have the top scorer in the league in Alfredo Morelos, we have one of the greatest goal scorers of the English Premier League in Jermaine Defoe, and actually we have a very potent attacking mechanism sat behind them with the likes of Scott Arfield, Daniel Candeias, Ryan Kent. Or is that a mental thing, in your opinion? Why is that? Why is there that the imbalance where you're hoping they didn't score, whereas you're confident that we won't score?
I don't really know. I can't put my finger on it, but I think it might be that Celtic throw extra men up into attack, because I've even seen their centre halves moving up. Whether it's a mental thing from other teams, the likes of Kilmarnock, thinking, oh, we're going to get a draw here against the champions, we'll try and hang on, and then they stop attacking. I don't know whether that's a part of it. I'd certainly think that teams at the moment are more frightened of Celtic than they are of Rangers. So I think that's possibly one part of it. But to put my finger on exactly why, I mean, the games that we have drawn or even lost, some of them, where the team have broke away and scored a goal. I mean, as I say, we just never looked like scoring. We just it was like hitting your head off a brick wall the whole day. And I think that's the difference. And I suppose that's to do with consistency.
Listen, consistency could be, let's say inconsistency could be the tagline for our season, of course. And not only have we spoken about that on this show, but it's coming out of Steven Gerrard's own mouth is saying that inconsistency has been crippling for us over the course of the season. Perhaps you expect that with a rookie manager. Perhaps you expect that with a rookie management team and with a new squad all coming together. But that inconsistency does seem to be dying away to a degree. Obviously, we now make that 5 games won in a row and 4 out of 5 games with a clean sheet. The consistency does seem to be coming together. Perhaps we're finding form at the wrong time. But I think we're now at the point where, in my opinion, and correct me, guys, if you think I'm wrong, but we now need to be looking towards a springboard into next season, because obviously, as we all know, the close season in Scotland is criminally short, and we will be finding ourselves in the European qualifiers within 2 months. So it's now all about gathering momentum, gathering pace, and crucially for this squad, gathering confidence. and springing into next season with a positive mind frame and with good results behind us, knowing that we can beat anyone in this league. And the important thing there is knowing that we can beat Celtic next week. Pete, before we move on and look at the state of the squad and talk about transfers and the latest gossip, in your opinion, what's the game plan for the rest of the season? I've got one eye on the fact, as Stevie mentioned earlier in the show, that the youths at Rangers have been doing incredibly well recently, and that the under-18s won their league last week. There was a cup win for the under-16s today, and the reserve team can win their league on Monday. And I'm sure by the time a lot of folk listen to this podcast, the reserves, let's hope, have been able to win the league and secure the equivalent of Champions League football. What's the game plan for the rest of the season, in your opinion? Is it worth blooding the youngsters through, or is it worth pushing on for the 6 points, considering on paper they are dead rubbers, and there's no dead rubbers in Scotland, there's no meaningless games in Scotland? Is it worth playing those youngsters, or is it worth pushing on for the 6 points?
No, well, it's only 2 games left, and one's against Celtic, so we always want to win Celtic, so I wouldn't put youth players in for that. I mean, I think people forget, it's okay saying the under-18s played great and they're playing, but people forget there's a really big jump between youth football and playing against Celtic. So I certainly wouldn't play them. I wouldn't play any youth players for that. I would just keep the team, play the year out with the squad we've got, and the way we've been playing. And one thing I wanted to say as well, when the style of football, when we've got Morelos up front, the whole thing was about getting the ball to Morelos. And the way we've been playing the last 5 weeks, we've been far more flexible, with Davis going through, Arfield going through, and at different times. So I think that's been a big difference as well, that we're not as readable, that people can think, oh, well, they're just going to punt the ball up to Morelos and Morelos will try something. And I think that's been a big difference as well, the way we've been playing the last few weeks, that we're a lot more flexible.
I totally agree with you, and it's in a strange and kind of perverse way, it's been somewhat refreshing having Morelos drop out of the side, and you can see the value that particularly Scott Arfield can bring to the squad, because I think he's been an absolute revelation, and I've spoken on the pod before about how I view this guy, Scott Arfield. I think that when he's not playing and when he's injured or he's suspended, you see him by his absence. The value that he brings to the squad is incredible. And actually, this brings us really nicely onto the final topic that I want to discuss with you tonight is transfer talk and the state of the squad. So just before we push into the latest transfer rumours, I think it's a really nice little segue into talking about current players and seeing where we are with the squad at the moment. And Pete, if we stay with Scott Arfield, he's verbally committed this week in an interview with Ladbrokes. He's committed to staying at Rangers. He acknowledges interest from the likes of Southampton, the likes of Crystal Palace, who are probably going to pay him more. Obviously, a bigger current media profile at these kind of clubs, bigger exposure, and certainly a bigger pay packet. But Scott Arfield is verbally committed to Rangers, saying his family's happy here, he's happy here, he likes being back up the road, he likes the environment, he feels appreciated. How important is Arfield to the squad, and what kind of role do you envisage him having next season?
Well, he's one of the few players that can play between the lines for Rangers at the moment, and that's his big thing. He can ghost into the box. And I hope you're not suggesting there's going to be a straight swap for Armstrong, by the way, at Southampton.
Well, no, the thing is, that's Stevie saying that last week. If anyone never heard the show last week, Stevie breaking the news that we are absolutely 100% signing Stuart Armstrong for Southampton.
I'll let Stevie answer to that one.
Aye.
Stevie's not biting.
No, well, Arfield obviously played a big part in the last few games, and I think it's definitely a player that I would be hoping to keep. I think we're pretty all sure that Morelos is going to be leaving, so we'll probably be changing our style anyway. And hopefully, if we're looking for a new centre forward, they'll get one where Arfield will play the sort of way he's been playing the last 2 or 3 weeks.
It's a really interesting one because I think he's been an incredibly strong character to have on the pitch, but by all accounts, the influence that he has in the dressing room is invaluable. And to me, he's the consummate professional. The creativity that he has on the pitch in terms of linking the midfield to the attack is incredible. And like I said, you notice him by his absence when he's not there. I think he's a real asset to the squad from an attacking point of view. And I was delighted to see the interview earlier with Ladbrokes where he said that he was committed to staying at Rangers. Stevie, I know that a lot of the folk listening to the show are delighted to have you back on after the kind of bombshells that you dropped on us last week. Last week you mentioned on the show that there were a couple of things in the pipeline that you couldn't really mention. Since then, a couple of things have come out in the media about one or two players that have been linked, and I'm going to presume that one of the players you couldn't really talk about being linked to Rangers was a certain Mr. Andre Gray from Watford. What can you tell us about any potential links and any moves that we might be making for him?
Not a lot, to be quite honest. I mean, he was one of three potential strikers that we're looking at. The other one we've already discussed, being Danny Welbeck. Interest in Welbeck and Gray is real. Whether or not they'll happen is I just don't know. It just kind of goes back to what I'm saying. Like a lot of the names that I've seen will surprise people because in many ways I think we're punching above our weight. But it goes down to the kind of Steven Gerrard factor in terms of people will want to come here and play for him. You've seen it with the likes of Defoe, even the likes of Arfield and Davis and things. That when you get these guys and the reasons kind of maybe different shape and why we're playing well is that guys like Arfield and Davis have genuine quality. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to our team. I just think that they've played in the Premiership, that they're quality players down there, and they've shown it in their time here. The guys that we're looking at and aiming at are exciting. I mean, people have kind of rubbished the Danny Welbeck thing and rubbished the Andre Gray thing, and I'm not saying that they're coming. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if we're looking at these guys, then that's where I'm encouraged, and we're certainly at least punching to get the very best possible that we can. And in terms of me saying it's going to be an exciting summer and things like that, people need to realise that I'm not saying that we're going to go out and spend 20 million. I'm not saying that we're going to go out and sign world superstars. What I am saying is we'll go and get the very best that's available to us, and a few of those names will surely excite people.
Stevie, does Danny Welbeck, does he not get a really bad injury problem behind him?
Yeah, which probably makes him perfect for Rangers, to be honest. We love a good knee injury.
Is he not described as the black Jordan Rossiter? Well, that's a horrible silence, by the way. That's a shocking pattern.
That died.
That was awful. Right, that's a good thing we're no live.
Is there any news? And maybe Stevie knows that. Is there any news in Rossiter whether he's going to be called back or whether he's just going to be punted? Is there any? Do you know?
No decision made on any of the loan players. None of them have been told, and they probably won't until after the season finishes. It's normally a few days after the season finishes that he'll sit down with everybody and tell them what's what. But with 2 games to go, he's not going to do that. So it's always been when the season finishes. It normally finishes Saturday, Sunday, whatever day it's on, and then by the Monday, Tuesday, we'll know where it stands. I certainly know that the likes of Doherty hasn't been told yet what's happening with him. So it will be the exact same with Jordan Rossiter. But on Jordan Rossiter's been fit now for over a year. He's had no injuries in terms of his problems with his growing. His whole problem was his growth and body problems with his bones and things like that. And that looks to have been sorted by our medical team. He's played consistently well for Bury for 6 months. I think he scored a cracker just there. Whether or not he has a future, Jordan Rossiter is undoubtedly a good player. The same way as Greg Docherty is undoubtedly a good player, but are they where we need to go, and are they better than the names we're looking at, is something that Gerrard's going to have to decide.
So one name that we have been looking at and that we've been linked with this week is in the centre back department. Is this guy from France, playing in France at the moment, and apologies for my pronunciation, Mexer, who I believe is playing out at Rennes. Stevie, is there much that you know about him? Not particularly if you know there's concrete interest, but have you heard much about this guy? Do you know much about his style of play? What do you know about this chap?
Absolutely nothing.
No.
Sorry, mate.
No,
I can't
sorry.
offer much to this at all. I don't ever recall seeing him. I don't ever recall even seeing his name. I just don't know. There's no point in trying to say otherwise. What I would say is that if we're going to spend money in terms of on other positions which might be more important, then there's no harm in looking at picking up certain positions for Bosmans and things like that. Now, by all accounts, this guy's got a pretty decent resume and he's highly thought of, and it does seem that we're quite far down the line with that. In terms of Gerrard was in France last week, but it's a difficult one. Rangers are a very kind of, it's easier to find out about British players and things like that because we have agents and things, who want to contact us and things like that. But when it comes to a lot of the foreign deals, like guys like Barisic and Katic last year, we don't get wind of this until it's more or less done because it's easier to keep a secret, basically, in Europe than it is here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're quite far down the line with that in terms of this boy coming. So he's obviously got something that we want. Unfortunately, however, mate, I'm sorry, I can't add anything to telling you what sort of player he is or what he's going to bring to us because I can't recall ever seeing him play.
Well, do you know what? Thankfully, this is my time to shine. For anyone that doesn't know, I've been living in Luxembourg for the past year, and I'm moving back to the UK in a couple of weeks. But for now, I'm a Luxembourg resident, and obviously the football out here is absolute garbage. But we're very, very close to France, and a lot of the football you'll get on the telly is French, Belgian, German football. So I've been watching a hell of a lot of continental football over the past 12 months. And for a football nerd like myself, it's wonderful. I've loved it. What's interesting about the French league is that you have a real break in the quality, and that the real top, the pinnacle of Ligue 1 in France is exceptional quality. The creativity flowing through teams like Paris Saint-Germain, Marseille, Lyon is exceptional. They're incredibly creative players, flamboyant players who could hold their own in any league in Europe. But then you kind of break down outside the top five in France, and it becomes very industrial and almost heavy-footed and cloggish football. And actually, in a lot of ways, is not too dissimilar to Scottish football in my uneducated opinion. And that's where you come into contact with guys like Mexer, is because the style of football they're asked to defend against in the main is very similar to Scottish football, and it's not particularly cultured. It's more about physicality. It's more about brute strength. It's more about battering down teams, and that's what actually, because I've seen Mexer a few times now playing, and I watched the cup final recently against Paris. It's what he does very well. Is he's no frills. He's no nonsense. He's a bit more polished than a Nico Katic, but I was saying just before we come in here, I said that, when I was growing up, Rangers would always have a no-nonsense, big, tough centre-half who would clear his lines and not necessarily do a whole lot more, but that's what you want him to do. And perhaps we've lacked that over the past maybe decade. We might have lacked that. So I think it's an interesting fit for Rangers. Obviously we've been burned in the past with the lower league English markets. You could make an argument that we've been burned this year with the Croatian market. So let's experiment a wee bit more in the French market. In my opinion, if this guy's coming on a Bosman, he's out of contract, and we're just paying the salary as opposed to a transfer fee, could be a really, really interesting proposition. I'd be really keen to see how this worked out. Pete, if we're looking away from the transfer rumours as to who's coming in, we might need to take a wee look at who's going out. And obviously, we've spoken a lot about comments that Gerrard has had around players who, if they're not going to apply themselves, they might need to find themselves a new club, such as perhaps the Barisic, the Grezda, the Laffertys of the club. We've spoken in the past on this podcast, though, about Alfredo Morelos, and you mentioned 10 minutes ago that it looks like he might be moving on in the summer. It's not a particularly controversial opinion. I think that's fairly widely accepted. But we spoke maybe 2 months ago about Morelos having a transfer value perhaps of up to 20, even over £20 million. He's now found himself out of the team for the past 5 weeks through suspension, and then today finding himself on the bench. That £20 million, do you think you now would need to revise that figure? Has that dropped at all over the past couple of months?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Rangers will sell him if they're going to drop the price to 10 million or 9 million. I don't think Rangers will sell him. I think they'll keep him. He's got a contract now to 2023, so we don't need to sell him. So I don't think Rangers will sell him if the price is going to drop down. So I think if any team wants him, they're going to have to come in. They're going to have to pay what Rangers want for him. It probably could bring the price down a wee bit because of his the way he behaves. But I think any team that wants him, they'll probably be hoping that we can sort out all his problems on the field, and they know he's a £20 million striker, but it's just whether you get him to be cool headed, to just do the right things on the park and not do the stupid things.
It's such a difficult one because he has now missed a lot of football in the run into the season, and in the run up to the transfer window. So I know that we're going to be covering this in quite significant detail over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So I don't want to go into it too heavily here, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on. Listen, I'm conscious of the fact that we're going to be running out of time very, very shortly. Stevie, just before we go, we had the announcement this week that there was a permanent contract for Stephen Davis will be remaining at the club for next season after his deal expires at Southampton. How do you feel about that? Is that a positive move, considering that he perhaps had a stuttering start to his second spell at Rangers?
It's certainly a positive in terms of now that he's getting played where he should be getting played, being quite vocal, if you like, if you can be on our blog, saying that Stephen Davis isn't a 10. I remember the St Johnstone game trying to play him as a 10, and he didn't look capable of doing that. His game is very much a deep playmaker role, and of course he's got himself match fit, and it just goes back. I touched on it last week. The players were warned. They were told that you're playing for your futures, and you're playing for your career here. And he took it on board, and he's proved his worth. I mean, Stephen Davis is a quality player. The question was whether he still had his quality, and he's shown he's had. So I mean, a 1 year deal. It's almost like we're learning. He's 34. One year's enough. I'm sure that if he has a good season next year and he does the same sort of things he has done in the last 3-4 games, then we could extend it again. But it's a sensible move for me, a sensible move for the club, and yeah, I'm glad he's signed. I'm glad he's staying.
Stevie, can I just ask you, do you not think, I mean, it's something I believe, do you not think that there was an 18-month deal put in place 6 months ago when Davis joined us, that he would have been here whether he was still rubbish or not anyway?
Well, it's certainly been suggested. I don't think it was any surprise. That I've said before on the Gersnet forums that it was done, and and that he would be signing. So I wasn't surprised by the announcement during the week. Certainly, was it done previously? Was there an agreement previously? I think only the real insiders at the club will know that. But I'm just, I'm more happy. I don't tend to kind of overanalyze that. I'm more happy with the fact that he's now producing what we know he can, and he's been played properly. These are the most important and good things for me.
Absolutely. And again today, he showed the class and the composure and the culture that he brings to the squad. Listen, gents, I think that is probably all that we have time for this evening. As always, let me first of all say a huge thank you to both Stevie and to Pete for their excellent contributions this evening, for giving up their very, very valuable time. It's always much appreciated. Guys, if you've enjoyed the show, please do be sure to hit the like and subscribe button so that you don't miss a thing from Gersnet. Also, be sure to head over to the website. That's www.gersnet.co.uk. Have a look on there. You'll get all the latest news. Join in with a very friendly Rangers discussion forum. As always, we're going to be back with another show next Sunday. But as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be back with a very, very special midweek Old Firm preview show. Colin will be in the hot seat bringing you all the Old Firm preview. So make sure you do tune into that and keep it on Gersnet for all the latest news in the run-up to the end of the season. All that's left for me to say is until next time, thank you very, very much for listening and have a great week.